I don't know how I feel about this computer. The screen is very tiny.
Board President Doyle speaking. We resumed the Oregon Board of Pharmacy meeting following the conclusion of our lunch break from 12 to 1. We will now continue with discussion items, starting with a special presentation from the governor's office, executive appointment subdivision. I'll turn it over to Executive Director Talks.
Thank you, Board President Doyle. This afternoon, we have the governor's office executive appointments advisor, Brandy Hemsley, that is going, and she has a guest with her as well. And I'll let Ms. Hemsley introduce our guest with her, and she's going to go through and share some information from the governor's office, the expectations, and how we can continue to effectively, efficiently produce as a board and meeting the governor's expectations. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Hemsley.
Oh, really quickly for those on the phone, this is mailing B as in boy.
Yeah, they're towards you. Okay. Well, all you missed was my embarrassing glasses chat. So my name is Brandy Hemsley. I'm the executive appointments advisor with the governor's office. And a big part of my role is to provide support for boards and commissions, including training and information and coaching and all kinds of things. So I will say a little bit more about that in a minute. But and I know I have a friend and colleague here with me today. I don't know if you want to say anything.
I am just happy to be here. I'm just here to observe. My name is Kevin Woods, and I work for the Medical Stuff. I'm the supervisor for our housing department, which is stabilization of the pathways to stabilization. So, yes.
Thanks. Put you on the spot. We're doing a lot of work together, specifically looking at boards and commissions and recruitment. To work with boards and commissions. Hang out a lot of things.
You go bend that way.
Okay, now I'm gonna switch glasses. So I won't go.
And just say next slide when you're ready for me to proceed. Okay.
That was it. So next slide. Okay. So today I was going to talk to you all about a few things. One was to give an introduction to the executive appointments team, the work we do, and a little bit about the board system, fortunately. I also have a sort of mini training that I suppose piloting with you all on meeting governance and decision making, really focusing on just some review of Robert's rules kinds of things. I want to talk a little bit about next steps and potential future training topics, and also hear from you all what you might like some of those to be. And then give an opportunity for some discussion and feedback and questions, particularly because, well, I'd like to hear what you all are wanting in the meeting.
Okay.
Oh, and before I get started, I will say to you that I have been going around to different, so I started with the governor's office in May of last year, so just under a year with the governor's office. And my position is one that was created by this administration, as I said earlier, to really focus on support for boards and commissions, to help do things like provide training, best practices, bring some consistent practices across our boards and commissions. We actually have almost 280 boards at this point that are governor appointed. And so that's a lot to get your arms around. And what we've discovered is that, there are lots of great practices and lots of great things happening out there, but sometimes we're lacking consistency, or, some groups are really strong in one area, but maybe have some growth or learning to do in another area. So part of what I'm doing is getting out, observing boards, being part of meetings, and also sharing information with folks so I can get feedback on what you all think, and what areas are there where you would like to go, or what things are you doing that you feel is going really well now and you want to keep doing, and maybe share with others so others can learn from you. That's just a little more about what I'm up to. Next, please. Oh, yeah. It's a little hard for me to tell because of the glasses thing. So the executive appointments team is made up of these folks. This governor, as I said, expanded that team. We went from 2 to 5 with Governor Kotek. We have Maya Crawford Peacock, who's our executive appointments director. She manages our team. She's the face of the thing. She interfaces with all aspects of the process, working with legislators, advisors, interested parties, community groups. Me as the executive appointments advisor, I'm up there as a backup for Maya to support her in the daily, overseeing daily operations, and really, as I said earlier, providing that support, being that bridge between the governor's office and all those boards and commissions. We have Charlene O'Brien Lee, who many people interact with, so that might be a familiar name. She's our executive appointments manager, and she manages the appointments process and timelines all the way from the application stage through when you're seated on your board. And she maintains records, keeps up our database, and does things like that. Helen Hong is our executive appointments coordinator. She supports recruitment and processing of applications, and helps coordinate appointments, particularly with advisors for our health and human services boards, and especially our licensing boards, because as I'm sure you all know, those boards come with a large body of work and a lot of responsibilities. And so there was just we felt we want to give some extra support to make sure that those boards are really able to get their appointments and be operating well. And then Zachary Pipo, who's our executive assistant, kind of all things to all people, really fantastic guy, supports us all with scheduling and supports Shawneen a lot with some of these processes and things. I've already talked about my roles, so I will skip that part. One thing I wanted to say that I think I forgot to say earlier was that part of what I've been doing over this last year, so I mentioned sort of getting out, introducing myself and observing, kind of talking to boards, but also some of you may have seen the surveys that went out, and I've also been having one-on-one conversations with folks to gather information about potential systems improvements, and also especially what training and information folks have. And so when I go down that list, a lot of what we heard from folks were boards are really interested in how to meaningfully engage with the public and the communities they serve and make sure that they're getting that meaningful public input from folks. Probably the number one answer from folks was public meeting law. We don't know about that. And related issues around how to facilitate groups and manage groups and build positive relationships within the group, and also some governance practices, I guess. There were folks, especially some newer board members, who want to hear more just basically about state government and how it operates and sort of where boards and commissions even fit within that system of government. There was a lot of interest in equity and inclusion topics for boards and commissions. And then a lot of questions about ethics and conflict of interest. I think that's a thing that a lot of folks have shared, especially board members, have shared is important to them, and they don't always understand it, and then that makes them really nervous. And so people are seeking more on that. Okay. Can you go back?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
I might have gone. Okay, so the board and commission system as a whole, as I said, since as of last session, when some more groups were created, we're getting close to 280 boards and commissions, and they represent a broad range of issues and policy areas, and all around the state. There's several types, including policy making, governing, advisory, licensing, and judgment or quasi-judicial boards. And a lot of boards are combinations of these things, combinations of these responsibilities. I like to say to folks when I'm talking to community members about maybe joining a board or commission, I like to say, if you name a policy area or an issue or an occupation, there's probably a board connected to it. So there's something for everyone. And our board system is really a wonderful opportunity for public engagement. This is how we get folks outside of state government. We get that expertise and that knowledge and ideas from all around the state and to help us all in order to evaluate and help things run better. And I will also say that, the governor is especially committed to, making sure the boards and commissions are running well. but also ensuring that the membership on our boards and commissions really represent the rich and growing diversity of our state. And, that's, we talk about age, racial and ethnic diversity, language diversity, disability diversity, geographic, we talk about older adults, younger adults, I mean, you name it, right? There's so many folks out there that maybe have not always been represented or been included or even felt welcome, I think, in our system. And so we're looking for those opportunities to change that. So again, just thinking a little bit about the board system and kind of how this all fits together. So every board has some sort of leader, and that is an executive director or board administrator usually. Once you all have a executive director. And so that's a designated person who is often an employee of the agency where the board is housed. And that person, sometimes with other staff, serves as a liaison between the board and other agencies, including the governor's office, and really supports the board and manages the day-to-day operations of the board. And so the specifics of the role, like the duties of that role, and some of the reporting structures will vary from board to board. Sometimes it's really clear by the rules or statutes or by law. Sometimes it's a little more flexible. Of course, you all have an executive director, so at the board of pharmacy, that example. For the pharmacy board, I know you all just not too long ago went through a hiring process, so you sort of know a bit about that. And so the board reviews the candidates and recommends the selection to hire. And you all also have this role in participating in annual performance reviews. And of course, your ED is there to hire and manage the staff, manage priorities of the board, set those daily or manage day to day, and also really importantly, serving as the conduit for you all to the governor's office through our policy advisor, our health policy advisors, and our team. So myself and Maya and the team. And ultimately, at the end of the day, me, you all, Jamal, my colleagues back in the governor's office, we all serve at the pleasure of the governor. And so ultimately that's where the buck stops. And I think, so that's something that I get a lot of questions about too, is like how does all this fit and who reports to who? And at the end of the day, that's really the thing to know. Next, please. So we talk about roles as board members. Something I forgot to say at the very beginning, pieces of this, the reason I'm sharing, are to sort of preview the new board member handbook, because a lot of the questions that we get most often, and a lot of the questions I'm sort of highlighting, trying to answer a little bit this morning, we put them all together in the board handbook. There was one that was created about 10 years ago. We used that as the starting place, but it was pretty outdated and they didn't have the most accessible language. And so we kind of tried to revamp that. And so once that goes out, I'll be really interested to hear feedback. So some of this you may see again later, yes. Just the highlights. So in terms of the role of a board member, there are many reasons why folks choose to serve on a board or a commission. Some folks want to learn more about state government. Some people, it's just really they're just really interested in serving and giving back to others. Sometimes people are interested in impacting a particular issue that's important to them, or ensuring the quality of and integrity of a product or service or profession. And I would say there are many more reasons. There are many reasons to serve as there are people serving, and a lot of folks have some kind of combination of reasons. But ultimately, you're there to represent and serve the people of Oregon. And so, each board member's primary responsibility is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Oregonians. And we always encourage board members, and this gets back to the request from a lot of folks for advice about kind of that community engagement piece. We want board members to seek input from interested parties and really carefully consider the information you're getting from different points of view. And ultimately, however, and you may get information, you may get people who can really strongly and pressuring you one way or another. But at the end of the day, again, your responsibility is always to protect the public And also, it's not very unusual for folks to be put forward or recommended for membership by a professional association or an interest group. That's something that's relatively common across the board system. And, when that's the case, of course, board members are always expected to provide the board with that experience and knowledge and bring the point of view of that group to the board. However, again, keeping in mind your core purpose to serve the public and just understand that, if you're appointed to serve the public and not only as the representative of a specific group. And so, if you ever find yourself in a situation where the interests of the group that you represent or that has sort of recommended you conflicts with that of the public, then you would have to go with the needs of the public. Also, some words about being an effective board member. Sometimes folks sort of ask about that too, like how can I get the most out of this, and how can I make sure I'm really giving what's needed. So thinking, some of the basic things like regular meeting attendance and really being engaged and active while you're here. I really encourage folks to seek the support that you need to fully participate, and whether that means disability accommodation, language accommodation. It could just mean I didn't get a lot of sleep last night, and so can people be patient and maybe remind me what we talked about last meeting. Like, there's all kinds of ways that you might need support, and I would say don't be shy about asking for that. As best you can, come prepared. A lot of boards will have sort of requirements for people to review materials or come to meetings ready to make decisions about certain issues. And so do what you can to be prepared before the meeting. Another thing we really encourage folks to do is get a deep understanding of your board's role, scope, and authority. And that's actually something that I encourage folks to do as they're considering applying for a particular board. Look into that stuff ahead of time and see if that kind of aligns with your skills and your interests. Because that can really help too. And then obviously once you're on, making sure that you understand. And if you have questions, ask your ED, ask staff. You can always reach out to us in the governor's office as well. And then, working to build positive relationships with other board members and your ED or board administrator and the staff. I think that, sometimes people, especially with a board has a heavy workload and is really busy and really wrestling with very serious issues, it can be easy to kind of neglect some of the relationship stuff. And I think that that is really important, and particularly when you're doing hard work or talking about hard things, having those relationships to draw on, it almost prevents like a bank of goodwill almost. And you'll be able to do better work together when you're really connected. Next, please. There we go. So some of the other things that I like to encourage folks to think about, be the inclusive voice. It can be hard to speak up sometimes, but we really encourage folks be the one to raise your hand and say, who have we consulted about this issue? Who is this issue going to most impact? And have we talked to them? Are they here in this room? Have we really done our due diligence to make sure that we're doing the best we can and being as inclusive as possible? Obviously learn about the issues affecting your board and the people and communities impacted by your decisions. And sometimes that means, to get back to that community engagement piece, would mean doing some broader engagement, having some bigger conversations, really reaching out to folks to learn more. Operating with transparency and adhering to public meeting law. And again, I keep saying community engagement. I'm a community engagement person, I can't help it. But engage the public. And obviously also remembering to act as a board and not individuals. Plenty of people have probably seen this happen or been part of a situation where, someone kind of steps in front of the group and sort of acts on their own without maybe not even on purpose, but without necessarily having the full group support. But so just knowing that all actions must be taken by the board as a whole and that no individual is meant to speak on their own for the board without the full consent of everyone. And also, touching on something I touched on a little earlier, is take care if you're wearing multiple hats. This is something that comes up very frequently across lots of different boards and commissions. We all have multiple hats and it can be hard to keep straight. So it's like, remember, when you're here as a member of the Oregon Board of Pharmacy versus a member of a professional organization or maybe faculty, or I'm making all this up off the top of my head. So if it doesn't, but you get the idea. You know, maybe I'm faculty at a university that trains people in my profession, or maybe, you know, whatever it is. Just making sure that when you're on your board and you do board business, that you're really thinking as the board member, staying in that role. And then, you know, I mentioned earlier ethics and conflict of interest, and this is another thing that there's more information on in our updated handbook. This is another issue that people have tons of questions about, and there are actually folks that really specialize in this. So I'm not going to go too far down this road today, except to say, you know, just remembering the primary mission and knowing that that state law forbids board members from using office for any personal gain. And that the Oregon Government Ethics Commission is an excellent resource for all things related to this. They have a guide that's published online, the Guide to Public Officials. It's all about these topics. They have trainings that you can attend, live webinars, and they're developing new trainings all the time. So I'm actually meeting with them next week with their training for their next coordinator next week. We're talking about how we can make sure that boards and commissions in particular have access to all this training information, because there's a people are really asking for it. So we want to make this really available to all of you. So I will move to the next section, unless you only have pause for thoughts or questions before I go on.
Member Doyle, question from board member Hall.
Is board member Hall. I just had a question about an effective board member and engaging with the public and not acting as the board. It kind of makes sense, but then I feel uncomfortable. I'm the newest member. I want to talk to my peers and get people involved in what we're talking about so that they can, you know, got it, the more eyes that look at things, the better. No, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think it's great and sort of obviously normal, but like it's really common for board members that have the kind of conversations that we're talking about, to get out there and say, hey, part of this board, and maybe you want to come to our next meeting. You know, I think so. There's this thing of being kind of an ambassador. That's really great. I think when I talk about speaking on behalf of the board, for example, like say I'm a member of a board and I go to a state legislator and say, you know, the board of classes wearers is really opposed to these transition plans. We want to outlaw the state, and that's actually as far as and the board interested in that. Or maybe we talked about it in the last meeting and said, let's decide if it's more of an issue or not. But I just kind of that's more what I'm talking about. Or, you know, you do a media interview, say, well, I'm a member of the board of classes. I've got to tell you that this exists. Being really clear about your role and ideas and your belief in the board system. Or decisions that have been made by the entire group and agreed that they.
Brandy, could you bend your microphone towards you? Thank you. That's okay.
By April 15, and I spoke to Executive Director Fox about whether or not the Board of Pharmacy will also need to complete that. And you know, what's the difference between this board versus a policy board? Why this board doesn't have to comply with that state
conflict of interest, not ethics. Conflict of interest statement. Where you have to fill out, like, have you received $10 or more from, very detailed.
I'll have to go, but maybe you already have the answer.
Can try. Executive Director Fox, part of the reason my understanding is, because we were not added into the legislation. And so because the board wasn't part of that when the legislature took action on that before, and it would need to go through rulemaking, go through the whole process through the Ethics Commission to be able to have Board of Pharmacy be required to submit those
What is the name for it?
conflict of interest or an ethical statement that every other agency is required to submit by the 15th of the month.
Because my answer was going to be, I'm gonna have to go back and find out, because there are a lot of things that are different for different licenses. So
If I can, the only other thing that I would bring up before Ms. Hemsley moves forward in the presentation is the board will receive a training, and the Ethics Commission with their new authority that the legislature just adopted for that agency. Their agency and that team is going to be here later this year, at the June meeting or
I believe it's August.
August meeting. The Ethics Commission is going to each of the boards and commissions. So they'll be here before this board and speaking to you about their role. And one of the things that they want to make sure that they impress upon you is open meetings law. Just make sure that what Ms. Hemsley has on the presentation, you just may want to go read the manual and make sure that you are adhering to that. Because with the new legislation, that if someone submits a complaint against you, it would be you in your official capacity and your individual capacity as a private citizen. And DOJ will not be able to represent you. You would have to get your own attorney, spend your own money, and you will not be protected by the state. So there's certain things that with the new legislation that passed that you just want to be mindful of, and they'll talk a little bit more about that later this year, but I just wanted to just share that with you so you knew.
Board Member Emmons, so is there, do y'all have like malpractice insurance? No, I know you do, I do.
Remember Doyle, it's available for purchase for pharmacists. It costs about 91.
But it's not required, right?
It's not required, no.
This is for my malpractice insurance wouldn't cover a complaint against, like I've had a complaint against me, so it wouldn't have covered that. It would be a patient specific malpractice thing, not a board complaint.
And one, I
Like,
was gonna add one other thing to the question you were asking about the conflict of interest. So all of the boards and commissions are though required to receive information to do training on this. So you all would have had that piece. So it is being addressed with this board. It just looks a little different. I think. There is something.
Remember Doyle had another follow-up question from slide 9 where he had spoken about taking care of wearing multiple hats. I was wondering if you could provide a couple of examples of best practices for self-reflection with regard to making sure that you're one's wearing the appropriate hat, and or what are the obligations of other board members to verify that another agent of this board is wearing the correct hat.
So I really like that question. That's a very good question. I would like to reflect on that a little myself and maybe get back to you all, because especially when you think about like self-reflections. I mean, I do think your point about other board members, if there is a real opportunity there for you all to kind of support each other, and kind of remind each other and help keep each other, you know, focused in that way. But I would want to think a little more about that. I appreciate the question.
this is board member Chin. I can give you an example. When I was the president of the Board of Nursing, there's also the president of Nurse Oregon. Those are very two different hats. And the executive director at the time was extremely uncomfortable with me having both of those hats. And it took time for her to see that I understood that my hat with the nurse practitioner organization was very specific to promoting and strengthening nurse practitioner practice, and that my role on the board had only to do with regulation and not with promoting, and moving forward any kind of legislative changes to our scopes. So it was, those were two very different hats, and I had to be mindful and cognizant, and particularly on board nursing meetings, which hat I was going to be.
Thank you for that. And I could see, one way, I mean, I don't know how you did it, but I can imagine even something as simple as before you go into the meeting, kind of looking through the agenda and maybe trying to think, are there areas here that touch on this other hat that I'm not wearing today? So because it's almost like to be aware of the thing that can help you kind of not do the thing, right? That's something that comes to mind after you say that.
Is a lot of self.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't.
Can't hear
you, please.
I said that requires insight, and if you lack insight, it's very hard to be self-reflective. It has to be some sense of insight awareness to begin with, in order to become self-reflective.
And that's an area too, where I think if you're someone who's wearing a couple of hats and that's the case, that's where a trusted peer could come in handy. Maybe you and another board member sit down, or maybe you and executive director Fox sit down and just say like, hey, I want to make sure if there's something I'm missing here. I might have some spots that I can't see. Can we kind of talk this through, and what you see as the potential spots or worry spots, and how do we talk about this? I mean, that's another thing that could help us get someone else to help you think it through.
See any other hands raised, so please continue.
Okay. So, and this is, like I've said this a few times, but again, some of this is an opportunity to kind of pilot some things. So I'm always really happy for the feedback and the discussion. I really appreciate it. So I was going to say a little bit about meeting governance and decision making, because I know you all do focus on Robert's rules. That's mostly what I have here is just some brief information about Robert's rules. So there are many different ways to conduct meetings and sort of govern meetings and make decisions as a group. And, across all our boards and commissions, there are a lot of different ways that folks approach this. And it really just depends on the needs and wishes of the particular board. All of these things have their advantages and disadvantages. I mean, this isn't an exhaustive list, but there's lots of ways to do it that come with advantages and disadvantages. And some of it has to do, the way a group chooses to govern themselves has a lot to do with levels of formality required within the group, the kind of work that they're doing, and really just the philosophy and goals that they're operating under. And so, parliamentary procedure is one that, Robert's rules is one that a lot of folks use. I know a group that uses what they call Roberta's rules, which is just more of a, because they aren't required, they don't have a lot of requirements around formality. And so they kind of play fast and loose with it, and they call it Roberta's rules. There's something called the Democratic Rules of Order, which is a basically simplified version of Robert's rules. There was a married couple that designed it and wrote a book about it, and they took it, like the actual manual for Robert's rules is something like 200 pages, and they took it down to like 17 or 27. Like, it's just a simplified plain language kind of version of the thing. Liberating structures is probably what I would call one of the consensus-based models, and it's actually a group of practices that include not just decision making and meeting governance, but relationship building and the word team building kind of skills. So it's kind of a bigger thing, but still similar. Those are just some examples of kind of what's out there and how people can choose to do this. But I will talk today about Robert's Rules of Order, and I wanted to note that the information that I have here, I took from a guide that I found online that was really good. So I have the link here for you to look at. It was developed by the state of Utah for some of their boards and commissions, and I just thought it had a nice summary. In terms of Robert's Rules of Order or parliamentary procedure, it does have a lot of benefits. Obviously it's a way to maintain order, to make sure that people are taking turns and exercising some of those types of courteous behavior. Really lets the board, because you just talk about one thing at a time, and so it enables the board to just hopefully systematically consider one issue at a time. Provides an opportunity for all sides to be heard within that structure. And the goal is to ensure majority rule while protecting the rights of those in the minority. Those are the benefits. There are some downsides, and they're not on the slide, but I would say sometimes the level of formality people find challenging. Sometimes the language and the complexity of some of the rules and processes can feel inaccessible, especially to folks who are maybe new to the process. And I think while it does strive to make sure all folks are heard, I think that there are instances where you might, in order to speak up and be heard within the structure of those rules, you have to be able to kind of like do certain things. It doesn't necessarily allow for people who are maybe not as comfortable with that procedure. So, but it's a good framework, and it does have a lot of benefits. The only reason I talk about the disadvantages is just for folks to be aware that as you're using this, you can be looking for those potential pitfalls and kind of work against them. So that's why I'm glad with that. Next thing is so basic principles. So a quorum is required to conduct business. Can't conduct business if you don't have enough of the membership present. Every member has equal rights and obligations to the group. No one is to speak until they're recognized by the chairperson, and one person at the time has the floor, so there aren't any distracting side conversations, and everyone can focus. And we consider one question at a time. Consider the issue, make a decision, then it's go to the next thing. And decisions are made by majority rule, and the chairperson is there to be an impartial person who helps. Some definitions, because another piece of feedback I've gotten both current board members, not necessarily this board, I'm thinking all the boards I've surveyed, and potential board members, people who are interested in board membership, is that a lot of times we use language that people don't always know what it means, and then it kind of shuts them out because it's like, why not? So I have some definitions here of some of the basic terms that we use when we use in this process. So a motion. So that's a formal proposal for the group for consideration or action. So you might say, I move that we just end the meeting now and I'll go enjoy the sun. That's how that's phrased, right? And so it's a formal proposal. A second, that's a statement by a member who agrees with the motion. So if I say that and then, you say, I second that, right? And then that, yeah. And then we can vote. Well, I'm not sure. An amendment, amendment is any changes made to a motion, and you can do that in a number of ways. You can strike words out, you can add words in, you can do both. You can substitute one paragraph or resolution in for another. Yes. A little bit about some of the roles that people play. So the presiding officer or chairperson. That's the person who facilitates the meeting. That's usually the president of the board. And that person is responsible for introducing business, recognizing speakers, determining if a motion is in order, keeping discussion focused on the pending motion. So it's back to that thing of like, let's consider one thing at a time, maintaining order. And then once folks are ready, putting motions to a vote and then announcing the results of the votes. just a little more about motions. And what tends to happen, or, what's supposed to happen. So, so a member needs to be recognized by the chair. That's, you always have to be recognized before you speak. And then that member can make their motion, which could be seconded by another member, or must be seconded by another member before it's considered. And then once that's done, the chair will restate the motion and then open it up for discussion. Then the group is then able to discuss and debate the motion. And then whoever it was that made the motion gets first dibs, gets to talk first during the discussion. Debate is closed when the discussion either ends or 2/3 of the people vote to say, hey, we're gonna stop debate now. So once that's done, the chair restates the motion again. And if necessary, can clarify the consequences of the yes and no votes. And then the chair calls for the vote and, asks all in favor. Everyone who's in favor says aye, and then says all opposed, and then those people say no. And then you have the vote. And then I had some general rules for debate. So as you all are discussing and considering the motion on the table, all discussion must be relevant to the immediately pending question. So again, that's the thing about address and talk about one thing at a time. No member should speak more than twice for each debatable motion. All remarks should be addressed to the chair, so no cross debate. So you're not sort of pinging stuff back and forth at each other. I don't mean you, I mean the group. Debate should focus on issues and not personalities. Whenever possible, the chair should try to alternate the people speaking between those who are in support, speaking in support, and those speaking in opposition, so that there's kind of a back and forth. And members should not disrupt the assembly, which is, yeah, kind of speaks for itself. That's my just brief sort of overview, some Robert's Rules tips. I think it's something that I think, well, that's just my first attempt. Something to expand on later for folks who are interested, but top level overview. Okay, so in terms of what's next, I'm available for support, feedback, any information you need. I'm particularly interested in hearing from board members, because I mentioned I'm sort of getting out there and talking to folks. I've done a lot of one-on-one conversations with a lot of executive directors and board administrators. I'm also really interested in those one-on-one conversations with people who are members of our boards, various boards and commissions, to hear about how things are going. What's your experience as a board member been like? What kind of information are you looking for? What kind of support do you need? Any of that. And so I'm always available. I'm also a no wrong door kind of person. So whatever your question is, if I'm not the person who can help, I will get you ready to go. So never hesitate to reach out. I do plan to start hosting some regular opportunities for board members to meet, get training, and do networking with each other. I'll say that in some of my travels around the state, I've hosted a couple of just informal get-togethers. So, I went out to Deschutes County and I just sent an email to all the Deschutes County board members that said, hey, if you live out here, I'm coming to town. Let's all get together. We'd love to just meet, get to know each other. And it was a really neat, positive experience. And I did a couple other times. And it was so fun because, you have people from members of all different types of policy boards, all different subjects, but they were having a lot of the same experiences. And so for them to get to talk to each other and support each other, and for me to get to hear what the challenges were and what the strengths were, that was really beneficial for everyone. So we'll be hosting some of those opportunities, and also, as I said, training for some of those things people are asking for. I'll continue to develop those resources. Where the things exist, I will find them and share them. And for some things that don't exist, where I have the expertise, I will develop them and share them. And then, I wanted to highlight what your executive director said earlier about the Oregon Ethics Commission coming and doing some trainings with this group. So that's all coming soon. So that is all the stuff I came to say. And you're doing that.
Executive Director Fox.
Thank you, President Doyle. I just want to add to what Ms. Hemsley has stated as it relates to the transformation that's happening in this administration across the state enterprise and the direction of support to boards and commissions that are small in nature or larger. And what the executive appointments office is doing, is phenomenal. It's great. It's what we need, a better manual to be able to help us, run meetings across the state more effectively and efficient. One of the things as we look at the Board of Pharmacy that, the board, particularly probably after June, will have to look at is, two things. Thing number one is, ORS 689, and that chapter 185, it really states, the specific way that this board shall vote under table 2, and we have that in your iPads, and it talks about quorums and things of that sort. So that comes into play. The second thing that comes into play is when we talk about Roberts or Roberta's, rules of order. The most commonly known and used parliamentary authority is Robert's Rules of Order, by Henry Robert. And some folks use Alice Sturgis Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure. The Oregon House and Senate uses and relies on Paul Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure, the 1989 portion. And any of those texts could be used for commissions, deliberations. The one thing for this board is, because I'm not sure that we've ever put on the record, we use modified and we state that, but possibly with the new board in June, we have new leaders, unless you want to do it before, the board will have to decide and make a motion on and state which version that you're using, which edition that you're using the Robert's Rules of Order, so it's on the record as it's outlined. And I wouldn't say it was the DOJ manual that states exactly the sufficient motion and purpose that you're using is going to be this title. This board and commission is using this edition of the reference book and shall be governed by that process as a public body. So that's one thing that we'll probably discuss and probably look at in June when you have elections too. So moving forward, it's on record and the state knows exactly how we're governing and as a body.
Members have any other questions or comments? Member Patel?
Board Member Joe, thank you for presentation. So a couple of questions. So I understand what's the role of board member, but then you can clarify, I would appreciate it. What is the scope and authority of board member? And what is the role of board staff?
That varies a lot from board to board. And so I wouldn't want to try to answer that question off the top of my head without going and looking at the statutes that govern this board and hearing a little more about your specific staffing structure. So I guess I want to get back to you on that question because that feels like a big question. I want to make sure I understand before I answer. So, yeah.
My second question is, so do all the board, they have chair and vice chair in Oregon?
Most do. I mean, there's so many, right? Like I said, almost 280. So it's possible that there are boards that are operating under a different structure. I mean, there are some of these collaborative decision-making models don't necessarily have like a formal chair, vice chair thing. I don't know how many of our boards are actually operating under a thing like that. So I would say, I'm sure most of them do, and there may be some that don't.
That leads to my third question then. So if you know, top of your head, so what's the pros and cons if you having a board chair and not having a board chair?
Oh, I think having a board chair is almost always going to be a positive thing. And whatever that role looks like, however it's defined, however the group decides who sits in that role. I've heard of groups that will alternate even in this is probably not the way you all, I mean, I don't know, I'm not gonna say how you want to do things, but like, I've heard of groups that would say like, well, a different person will chair our meeting each month, like, but it's typically important for there to be someone who is facilitating and managing discussion and keeping the meeting moving, and, that, so that would be very hard to do without a chair. And most boards will also then choose to have that be the same person for consistency's sake, and so that person will kind of be better and better in that role and kind of get sport, like I said, for consistency. That answers your question. I'm kind of like trying to imagine a whole world of other possibilities, but kind of help us in what you're saying. Does that help?
It helped, thanks.
The questions or comments? Member Joyce?
Board Member Joyce, so, to what extent can a board member talk to another board member outside of a board meeting? Obviously, certain topics are off limits. I don't know if this is a good question you can answer.
Right. That's a
But-
public meeting law question that I can
Yeah,
answer.
okay. And so my thing was that, my issue was that, if there's a new board member, and another board member wanted to give that for new onboarding, or new board member, incoming board member, some advice on procedures, would that count as a meeting?
I would refer you to your council or to the ethics commission, because I know they're developing some materials.
Onboarding stuff, okay.
Board member choice, technically that would be considered a meeting, as current state statute, outline. But that's something definitely to bring up in August when, Director Myers and her team does come. But as it states today, if more than one board member getting together will be considered a serial meeting and would be a violation of state law.
A board member could participate in part of the onboarding process for a new board member, correct?
Not correct.
Not, okay. Thank you.
Board Member Doyle, I wanted to demonstrate a difference in the presentation with regard to main motions that was presented in relation to how we operationalize things here. And I think that doing that is germane with regards to what Executive Director Fox had said about needing to state what rules that we're going to be using at a later meeting. And we state that we use Robert's rules modified. And so as the example under main motions that was provided for us today, a motion would be made, it would be debated, then it would be voted upon. A modification that we use here is that we debate the topic. New rules are presented to us, for example, where we are talking about the rules, and then the board chair asks for a motion, and then the motions are made after the debate has occurred. And so that's been usual and customary for our purposes, and it seems to meet our needs in the flow that is necessary to conduct business. So I just wanted to bring to light that depending on the choice that the board makes in the future, that may or may not have a change necessary for how you've been accustomed to seeing things operationalized here during meetings. Board Member Chin.
Board Member Chin, in response to Executive Director Fox's comment, I'm not arguing but clarifying, because we've been told in the past that board process topics, like how do you read these things? How do you organize these things? How do you go about trying to do the board business without getting into the topics, has not been disallowed and not a public meeting when you're helping somebody try to grok this, because it's a lot. So I wasn't aware that's new news to me.
Yeah, it would trigger because it's still, when you have two members of the board meeting about board business, it could be perceived as an actual meeting. And so therefore,
So. Would you like to finish? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, so therefore, that's why it's really suggested that we not have more than one together in any setting because of that. Because it's anything that you say should be public and in a public setting, because it's the good of the public of whatever the information is when you're talking about exactly board business.
So how does one onboard a new board member? Because.
Board Member Hall, how do you go to these events? There's only one of us.
There's an exception in the public meeting law that allows.
Can you-
There is an exception to the public meeting law that allows events to happen. Right, so like if you guys go to a BOP National Association. That one, if you go to that, you're allowed to do that. Exception to the public meeting law that allows that.
Remember Evans?
So when the board members get together and like Viverman left and they all went out to eat together, that wasn't allowed?
No, that's what you do, so more office and I could do a more legal training on it. Something that would be helpful.
Member Beaman?
Beeman, I would appreciate some more education on this. Because in my time on the board, there's just been vast swings of don't talk to each other, not a single word outside of the meetings to, well, no, you can talk about non-board business, and now it almost sounds like we're swinging back that other direction of no. And so it's hard to build camaraderie, and it's hard to become a board unit when you can't talk to another board member about their personal life, or you don't get to know the human, you know, the board member. And so I just think education on that, especially going forward, especially with the number of new board members that will be coming on, is going to be really important for us to feel the camaraderie that I think's been at times lacking.
And I just want to say, Executive Director Fox, we hear you loud and clear. It's frustrations from our side as well, but there's the same frustrations that as I talk with other agency heads and other boards commission, they're going through the same exact process and frustration as well. And so that's why in speaking with the Ethics Commission, and that's why they're coming later this year, because we can only book them for the August time period, but that's why they're coming, and we can have a more robust conversation, and we'll work with AG Hunt to see if it can coincide with that meeting, or if we need to do something similar. We'll discuss offline about that.
Member DeBarmore?
Board Member DeBarmore. So, can I help on board? Sure, I'm not a board member. Because it is absolutely appalling that someone has to flounder through this alone. It's just today helping her kind of navigate some of the things in the iPad.
Yeah, you can look into it, but yeah.
And it would not be anything case topic, only just how do you organize yourself? How do you prepare? How do you come prepared for a 3-day meeting? How do you manage your time? How do you,
That's
and,
the one.
and when our agendas look very different than what our agendas did before. Our agendas before helped us even be mentally prepared more. So, I mean, it's just things have changed so much to come in and not have any guidance from another board member to just mentally prepare yourself. I can't even imagine your first. I sat in the audience for years before I was a board member, and still my first board meeting, and I had a board buddy who I sat with for multiple days before I actually sat in my first meeting, and it was still overwhelming and stressful. I can't imagine. Those were only 1.5 day meetings. Right, true story. It was a thing. So I offer my services when I'm no longer a board member to assist in those because it's for the good of all.
That member Melvin?
Thank you. I was just going to state for the record that we do have board member orientation where we meet with the new board member for an entire day. I was just going to say, and we've revamped it, but the state is actually working on something else universal, which sounds very promising. So we do our best to, but again, 8 hours is not a lot of time to really, as you're sitting in here for an 8-hour meeting, it's a lot. And we understand.
I understand, but from a staff perspective versus somebody who's working full-time and maybe has a family or it, and then, but how do you put your own work away? You live this, you guys, you all live this every day. And you have your own language, right? How do you translate some of that to help someone else? I mean, just what's an administrative AB versus CA versus CR versus, all those things. It's just, yes, there's lots of tools. And in 8 hours you sit there, it's a hose.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's in your iPod, check this and this. I understand. I do. It's just hard. And we want people to do the right things and we want them to come and we want them to join and we want them to participate. And not sit here for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 meetings before they feel comfortable to participate. And so any way that, if it is okay, any way that I could help, I would be happy to, because it was for everybody's voice is important. And the more they understand and the more they feel comfortable, the quicker someone will step. And you guys do a great job, without a doubt, and do the best in helping us organize. The amount that you guys have done to organize, to help us to be prepared has been phenomenal. That has changed so much over the years and much appreciated. It's a lot.
No, thank you so much for bringing it up because I do remember 1 year ago when I onboarded, it was really overwhelming. And yes, I had I think about 6-7 hours of orientation, but then there was just 2 presentations by the DOJ and basically do not engage with the public. Now I say engage with the public, but it's good that it come from another board member or former board member, what that means, So it's, yes, we have different language, right? Like you as board member telling me, what that means versus you live, breathe this. And some new board member, they are wearing multiple hats. So thank you for that. I think I think that would be really helpful to the new board member to have some guidance what to do in organizing everything. So that's it.
Very much for the presentation today. We appreciate the information, and I think that will begin leading us down a path to better organization and operationalizing things. Excuse me. Executive Director Fox, any further comments? Okay, thank you. We will be transitioning to staff member from off. Is it okay if we transition to matters for the board? And then we will move into executive session in approximately 1/2 hour. Again, do I have a? Trying to remind myself if I have a reading and for you to matters for the board. Member Melvin, Paul.
I'm so sorry, staff member Melvin. I don't think we have a prompt for you.
Well, it's one
Sorry.
sentence here.
Oh, yeah, there is.
We will now take time for each board member to provide comments, ideas, or items for meetings. So we have a 1/2 hour set aside for this, and we have approximately therefore 3 or 4 minutes for each board member to comment on matters that should be brought to the board's attention. And we certainly will not be able to resolve the issues, but they could, these are things that we can put a pin in and consider for the future. We have this on the schedule twice, one for today, one for tomorrow. And I would ask so that we can best manage our time tomorrow, if there are no other additional, if you think that there are no other additional items to be discussed in this type of format tomorrow. If I know that by tomorrow morning or so, then I'll be able to better manage meeting time allotments. So at this time, we will review in the order of board president, board vice president, Beeman, DeBarber, Hall, Hammond, Joyce, and Patel. And so the one thing that I wanted to make sure that was brought to the board's attention, because my background is pharmacy education, that the American Associations of Colleges, the American ACPE has brought forward the new standards for pharmacy education for 2025. They are currently undergoing review right now. So pharmacists do have the opportunity to provide feedback. If you are interested in looking at the 2025 standards, they're available on the ACPE website. You'd be able to submit public comment. I know the American Associations of Colleges of Pharmacy, AACP, is vigorously reviewing the standards and modifications and providing feedback to ACPE. But if everything goes to plan, then there would be new standard for pharmacy education that we face that would become effective in July of 2025. Board Vice President Chase.
The comment that I had made earlier regarding legislation may affect public safety, I have no other comments. So regarding the rule that came through the legislation that allowed, it was the final verification that potentially has adverse consequences.
Board Member Doyle, to rephrase, you're looking for opportunities in the future to be better engaged before legislation is enacted, such that the Board of Pharmacy has an ability to provide feedback on the ramifications of language, and perhaps if the board would be able to adjust language before enactment of a new statute to avoid complications in the future. Remember Beeman?
Board Member Beeman, I have nothing for today.
Member DeBarmore?
Board Member DeBarmore, I would just ask the board to consider again potentially having the opportunity for the public to speak both at the end of today, on Thursdays, and the end on Fridays. These go super late, and it would be nice to have opportunity to speak on.
Board Member Doyle, I'm sorry, the speakers are the public. Thank you. Board Member Hall.
Board Member Hall. I mentioned this last time. Would like to, at some point, talk about, you know, the refrigerated and frozen medication standards. In mind, of course, the public safety, but, you know, being kind to the planet and less waste and a little more realistic.
Board Member Hemmons?
I had stepped out, so I don't know what you all talking about. But I don't have anything to say, whatever it was.
Member Joyce?
Board Joyce, again, national certification for technicians, new technicians coming into the pharmacy profession for 2026. I just think it's a good baseline for incoming technicians going forward. And also, the second thing, I wanted to have some kind of language regarding the House Bill 4034 and final verification for technicians. I do want to encourage, because the language in the House Bill says the professional judgment of the pharmacist, but I also want to include some kind of language that would encourage the use of technology for the technicians who are doing final verification, some kind of formal training for each organization, each outlet maybe at that level, because if there are, you know, concerns about patient safety, we want to make sure that the process is done safely. So that's it. Thank you.
Member Patel?
Board Member Patel. I don't know what was the procedure before on this board, but I feel like every board member should get a chance to go to this NEPP meeting, like one time, different board member every time, and just the one board member every time. And also that whoever board member go to those NEPP meeting, bring the knowledge and share with other board members. It is really important and you learn a lot and you kind of learn that what we are doing, what other states are doing and how can we improve. It's sort of eye-opening for me. So, I mean, I go to all NEPP meeting at my own expense, but I think everyone should get chance.
We have some extra time allotted. Floor is open if there are any other comments or questions. I saw Board Member DeBarmore's hand go up first.
Board Member DeBarmer, we used to have a lot more opportunity to hear what the staff were doing and because there were so many roles. Jen has dominated all the time. We just don't get that opportunity anymore to hear the things that the staff are doing, and it would be great if we do have some time. Hear from some of them because they do a lot of work on our behalf.
You have a direct comment to that?
I was gonna ask a clarifying question.
Yes,
It's,
please.
is, your question about now that we have extra time, or are you saying in perpetuity? And
I mean, ideally, in perpetuity, it used to be kind of a round robin. It was each board member got an opportunity to, if they went to a meeting, if we had something kind of like this, but it was something to report out on, but also every staff member who was present also had the opportunity to share kind of where they were, the things they were working on, the things they were proud of, things they wanted us and the public to know. And we haven't done that in a long time. And it's, I think it was an important piece for even the public to know what happens behind the scenes.
And part of, thank you for that. And part of what you'll notice on the actual agenda is why we, like matters to be discussed by the executive director and agency staff on there. So that, for that main purpose there, for us to share the good news, what's happening internally, as well as if there's any clarifications within the meeting that we need to state for the record, clear the record up, it'd be at that time.
Board Member Chin?
Board Member Chen, in relation to Board Member Patel's comment, I don't know what the rules of the Oregon Board of Pharmacy is and how they've how many people can go to a meeting. I know that this board probably has less finances than another board might, but on another board, like I was on board of nursing, the board president, and then whoever else could go of the other board members. Because of its availability, time out of practice. And the decision will be made on who else would go. But I don't know if you all have ever had more than one board member go to any of these meetings, or if there's a financial barrier to being able to do that.
Board Member Patel. Board Member Patel. So clarifying is like we should rotate the board members, right? So you go one meeting, he go another meeting, I go meeting. So everyone get a chance. So I don't know how that's what I said. Like, I didn't know how we make the decision. We just announced like probably tomorrow or like this board member is going to this meeting, but you don't know that, is that the term? You know what I mean? Because they have the voting piece as well. And that's what I was like, how we are going to learn how to vote, what to vote, right? What's going on? There's a procedure for it, which I noticed. So thinking, I didn't know what is the procedure is.
Typically been the vice president who's gone to the annual meetings. A lot changed COVID, kind of turned everything upside down, but typically it was the vice president who has gone to the annual meeting. That's how it was all years before. And then if there was a district meeting, and then
There's a district,
if we could get more people to go to the district meeting because it was closer, we did. But for the annual meetings, it was typically, or the meetings where board members go, it was the vice president that went. For that, it was that year.
thanks for clarification.
Board Member Joyce, so what role does the Board of Pharmacy have in regards to what PDMP reports? My question was yesterday was about the methadone clinic information. And from what I understand, I believe PDMP only documents retail pharmacy narcotics or opioids or controlled substances that are dispensed. And in methadone clinics, you have a clinical setting, and it also is for the purposes of treating opioid use disorder. And therefore it does not report to PDMP, but is there any way that the board can ask OPDMP to report methadone doses? So, because it is a public safety issue, and physicians are always trying to pin down that dose of methadone, so we don't hurt anybody. So can PDMP help with that?
Staff Member Davis. So ORS 431A 855 is where the statute lives about who has to report to PDMP, what has to be reported. It's an OHA statute. And you're right, it says prescription drugs dispensed by pharmacies licensed by the State Board of Pharmacy that are classified in schedules 2 through 5. And that 5 doesn't become active until January 1, 2025. So this coming January, right now it's schedules 2 through 4. So that's why you wouldn't see things like codeine cough syrup, pregabalin, things like that don't show up. So it would be a legislative change to go in and request additional. However, I do want to overlay that methadone is treated very special by the federal government. And there's a lot of laws that protect the data from being reported, like 42 CFR Part 2 limits the collection or release of data pertaining to behavioral health and substance abuse treatment services. And you cannot request pharmacies to collect data specific to prescriptions for substance use and opioid use disorder. So there's some federal overlay too that gets really kind of weird. So it would need to go through more likely the associations to request change, to go through the legislative process, but also realize that you might have some federal preemption that would butt up against it.
Board Member Joyce, yeah, I appreciate that clarity. I mean, and I do see from PDMP medications like Suboxone, buprenorphine, and medications like that that are specific to opioid use disorder. But yeah, thank you for that.
Or just pain, or member chin, or just pain treatment. I use those meds, but don't treat substance use disorder.
Member Doyle, it appears that we've concluded our matters to be discussed by the board. Again, tomorrow I'll check in to see if you'll have additional comments that you'd like to provide tomorrow. And then also we'll be expecting Executive Director Fox to be providing comments on behalf of board staff at that time. So with that, we'll take a break before we enter executive session. And that's what we'll be announcing an executive session and transferring into that as soon as we come back from break. We'll take approximately a 15-minute break and move into executive session at what would that be, 2:40? 15 minutes from now? Okay, thank you.